Tonight, before you go to sleep, ask yourself one simple question. Why do humans willingly spend nearly one-third of their entire lives completely unconscious, completely vulnerable, and completely alone? For almost all of human history, doing exactly that would have been one of the most dangerous decisions you could make. So here's the real mystery. It isn't why ancient humans slept together. It's why modern humans think sleeping alone is normal. Because biologically speaking, sleep is probably the single most dangerous activity humans perform on a regular basis. Not skydiving, not driving, sleep. For roughly one-third of your life, your muscles relax, your awareness of the outside world almost disappears, your reaction speed drops dramatically, and you become something remarkably simple. A motionless, defenseless pile of calories lying on the ground. If you were a predator searching for an easy meal, a sleeping human would be almost impossible to ignore. Which raises an important question. If sleep made humans so incredibly vulnerable, how did our ancestors survive millions of nights without locked doors, without security cameras, or even modern houses or solid walls? The answer wasn't stronger weapons, it wasn't better shelters, it wasn't even fire alone. It was each other. For tens of thousands of years, humans survived the night by sleeping together. Not because it felt comforting, because it dramatically increased the chances of surviving until sunrise. And once you understand why, you may never look at the modern bedroom the same way again. Let's begin with the biggest reason of all. Predators never sleep on our schedule. In fact, many of the animals that once hunted humans became even more dangerous after sunset, when our eyesight became weaker, our reactions became slower, and our ability to detect danger almost disappeared. A lone sleeping human represented the perfect opportunity. No awareness, no movement, no one nearby to raise an alarm, no one to fight back. From a predator's perspective, it was the easiest meal nature could offer. But the moment several humans slept together, the entire equation changed. More people meant more ears, more noses, more chances that someone would notice an unusual sound before it was too late. And surprisingly, modern sleep science suggests something fascinating. Even when everyone appears to be asleep, a group is never truly asleep all at once. Sleeping in a group didn't just add more bodies, it created an entirely different survival system. Think about it this way. If only one person is sleeping, that person has only one pair of ears, one brain, and one chance to notice danger before it's too late. But when 10 people sleep together, everything changes. There are now 20 ears listening, 20 eyes that will eventually open, and 10 different brains moving through different stages of sleep. That last point is more important than it might seem. Most people imagine sleep as a single state. You fall asleep, stay unconscious for 8 hours, and wake up in the morning. But that's not how human sleep actually works. Sleep constantly moves through different stages. Some stages are very deep, others are surprisingly light. During lighter stages, even a small sound, a snapped branch, or a distant growl can wake someone almost instantly. Now imagine 10 people sleeping together. None of them fall asleep at exactly the same second, and none of their sleep cycles stay perfectly synchronized. While one person is entering deep sleep, another may already be moving into a lighter stage. A third person might briefly wake up, turn over, look around, and then quietly fall asleep again. Without anyone planning it, the group naturally creates something extraordinary, a rotating layer of awareness. At almost every moment during the night, someone is statistically closer to waking than everyone else. That means unusual sounds, unexpected movement, or approaching danger are far more likely to be detected before reaching the center of the camp. One sleeping person has no backup. A group does. And modern sleep researchers find this idea remarkably consistent with how human sleep naturally behaves. No one has to stay awake all night. Nature quietly distributes awareness across the group. It's an elegant solution, simple, automatic, and incredibly effective. But it becomes even more fascinating when scientists look at people who still live in ways surprisingly similar to our ancient ancestors. If you think this idea is just an interesting theory, modern research makes it even more convincing. Scientists studying hunter-gatherer societies have discovered something remarkable. Groups that still live in ways similar to our ancient ancestors don't simply sleep through the entire night. Instead, different people naturally wake up at different times, not because anyone assigned them a shift, and not because someone ordered them to stand guard. It simply happens. Researchers studying communities such as the Hadza in Tanzania and several sand groups in southern Africa noticed an unexpected pattern. Throughout the night, someone was almost always awake. Sometimes it was only for a few minutes, sometimes a little longer. One person might wake up to adjust their blanket. Another might quietly look around the camp. Someone else might add another piece of wood to the fire. Then, they would calmly return to sleep. A few minutes later, another person would wake instead. No schedules, no commands, no formal guard duty. Yet together they created something that looked remarkably similar to a rotating night watch. It wasn't planned. It emerged naturally from the biology of human sleep. This gave the entire group an enormous survival advantage. Any unusual sound, any movement outside the camp, or any approaching predator had a much greater chance of being noticed before it reached the sleeping group. And the fire itself played an equally important role. Most people imagine ancient campfires as nothing more than a source of warmth, but they were much more than that. The fire provided light. It discouraged predators. It kept dangerous animals at a distance. It produced smoke that could drive away insects. And perhaps most importantly, it became the center of the entire sleeping arrangement. Families gathered around it. Children slept close to it. Adults formed protective circles around it. Whenever someone briefly woke during the night, they often checked the fire first. If the flames had become weak, they added another branch. If the fire was still burning strongly, they simply looked into the darkness, made sure everything was safe, and quietly returned to sleep. Without realizing it, they had just performed the role of a night guard. No army, no military training, no organized security system. Just ordinary human beings following natural sleep rhythms that protected the entire community. When you combine overlapping sleep cycles, brief nighttime awakenings, and a shared campfire, you don't just get better sleep, you get an intelligent survival system, one that helped humans survive thousands of dangerous nights long before cities, locks, or electricity ever existed. Predators weren't the only danger ancient humans faced after sunset. Cold could be just as deadly. Every night, as humans fall asleep, something important happens inside the body. Our core body temperature begins to drop. This isn't a flaw, it's a normal part of the sleep process. In today's world, central heating, insulated homes, and warm blankets make that temperature drop almost invisible. But for ancient humans, sleeping outdoors or inside simple shelters, it was a completely different story. A cold night could become a serious survival challenge. And this is where sleeping together offered another remarkable advantage. Human bodies constantly produce heat. When several people sleep close together, that warmth is shared naturally, without extra effort, without burning additional fuel, without consuming extra resources. Each person becomes part of a living heating system. Instead of every individual trying to stay warm alone, the entire group conserves energy together. This is exactly why many traditional societies, even in relatively recent history, slept closely packed together during cold seasons. It wasn't simply about comfort, it was about survival. Fires certainly helped, but fires require constant attention. Wood has to be collected, fuel eventually runs out, and flames naturally become weaker as the night progresses. Body heat, on the other hand, never stops. As long as people remain together, warmth continues to circulate throughout the group. In many situations, the combination of a shared fire and shared body heat created the safest possible sleeping environment. But ancient nights were different in another surprising way. People didn't always sleep through the night in one continuous block like most of us expect today. Historical records from many pre-industrial societies describe something known as segmented sleep. Instead of one uninterrupted 8-hour sleep, people often experienced 2 separate sleep periods. The first sleep, followed by a period of quiet wakefulness, and then a second sleep before sunrise. During that time awake, people didn't panic. They didn't think they had insomnia. Instead, they quietly talked with family members, checked the fire, prayed, reflected, or simply rested peacefully before falling asleep again. This pattern may sound strange to us today, but for thousands of years it may have been completely normal. Living without electric lights meant human sleep naturally followed the rhythm of darkness. Long winter nights often created enough time for 2 separate sleep cycles instead of one. Within a communal sleeping space, those quiet moments of wakefulness also strengthened social bonds. People could reassure one another, share a few words, check on children, or simply confirm that the group remained safe before everyone drifted back into sleep. The night wasn't always one long period of unconsciousness. Sometimes it became another opportunity for cooperation. At this point, a natural question begins to emerge. If ancient humans slept together, did they actually sleep better than we do today? Or were they simply surviving difficult nights? To answer that question, scientists turn to people whose lifestyles still resemble those of our distant ancestors. One of the most influential researchers in this field is sleep scientist Jerome Siegel. His team studied several hunter-gatherer and small-scale traditional communities in Africa and South America. These communities had very little exposure to artificial lighting, modern work schedules, or electronic screens. For years, many people believed ancient humans probably slept much longer than modern humans. After all, they didn't have offices, alarm clocks, or smartphones keeping them awake. But the research revealed something unexpected. These communities did not sleep dramatically longer than people living in modern industrial societies. In fact, their total sleep time was often surprisingly similar. So the biggest difference wasn't how long they slept, it was how consistently they slept. Their daily routines closely followed the rising and setting of the sun. They experienced regular exposure to natural daylight. Darkness truly meant darkness, and their sleep schedules changed very little from one day to the next. Perhaps even more interesting, reports of chronic insomnia were remarkably uncommon. Without prescription sleep medication, without blackout curtains, and without expensive sleep technology, many of these communities still maintained healthy and reliable sleep patterns. That doesn't mean ancient sleep was perfect. Life remained physically demanding, the environment was unpredictable, and nighttime dangers were real. But their sleep appeared to be closely aligned with the natural rhythms human biology evolved to expect. Researchers believe that consistency, rather than simply sleeping longer, may be one of the biggest reasons these populations experienced fewer sleep problems. And communal sleeping may have contributed to that stability by providing safety, comfort, and reduced nighttime anxiety. There's another group that benefited enormously from sleeping close to others: infants and young children. For most of human history, babies almost never slept alone. Across countless traditional societies, infants remained close to their parents throughout the night. This arrangement wasn't simply cultural tradition, it solved several practical problems at once. Young children lose body heat more quickly than adults. They require frequent feedings and are far more vulnerable to danger during the night. Keeping them close meant parents could respond immediately, often without fully waking up. Some modern researchers have also explored another fascinating possibility. Close nighttime proximity may help regulate certain aspects of infant breathing and sleep physiology during the earliest stages of life. This area of research is still evolving, and modern safe sleep recommendations must always be followed. But it suggests that sleeping close to caregivers may have provided biological advantages far beyond simple convenience. For ancient families, keeping children nearby wasn't just easier, it was one more layer of protection built into everyday life. At this point, you might be thinking, sleeping beside several other people doesn't sound particularly comfortable. And honestly, that's a fair point. Imagine trying to sleep while someone beside you snores. Another person keeps turning over. A child suddenly wakes up. Someone accidentally bumps into you during the night. Compared to a quiet bedroom, group sleeping sounds far from ideal. And the truth is, it wasn't perfect. Ancient humans almost certainly dealt with noise, crowded sleeping spaces, limited personal comfort, and constant interruptions. Those inconveniences were real. But evolution has never been about perfect comfort. Evolution rewards survival. The question wasn't, which sleeping arrangement feels better? The question was, which sleeping arrangement gives you the best chance of waking up alive tomorrow morning? When viewed from that perspective, the answer becomes surprisingly clear. The security provided by sleeping together almost certainly outweighed the discomfort. A few hours of interrupted sleep was a small price to pay compared to facing a hungry predator completely alone. This pattern appears again and again throughout human history, across continents, across climates, and across cultures that developed independently from one another. Communal sleeping kept returning, not because every society copied the same tradition, but because they faced many of the same survival challenges. When different groups repeatedly arrive at the same solution, it usually means that solution works. But there was another advantage that is much harder to see, one that existed entirely inside the human mind. Think about the last time you felt unsafe. Maybe you heard an unexpected noise outside your home, or you were alone in an unfamiliar place at night. Even if nothing dangerous actually happened, your brain probably stayed alert. You listened more carefully. You reacted to every sound. You found it harder to fully relax. Modern sleep psychology has repeatedly shown that perceived safety has a powerful influence on sleep quality. When the brain believes danger might be nearby, it naturally remains more vigilant. That heightened alertness makes it harder to enter deep, restorative sleep. Now imagine being an ancient human, sleeping completely alone in a landscape filled with real predators, without walls, without locks, and without anyone nearby to help. Remaining mentally alert wasn't irrational, it was exactly what survival demanded. Sleeping beside trusted members of your group changed that calculation. Your brain no longer carried the entire burden alone. Part of that responsibility was shared by everyone around you, and for the first time that night, your mind could relax just a little more. Not because the world had become safer, but because you were no longer facing it yourself. So far, we've explored why sleeping together made perfect sense for most of human history. But that leads to an even bigger question. If communal sleeping offered so many advantages, why do most people today sleep completely alone? The answer isn't that human biology suddenly changed. Our environment did. For nearly all of human history, private bedrooms simply didn't exist. Large houses divided into multiple sleeping rooms were extremely rare. Most families shared the same space, not because they preferred less privacy, but because survival demanded it. Then, over the last few centuries, everything began to change. Homes became larger, walls became stronger, doors could be locked, windows could be secured, cities became safer, predators gradually disappeared from everyday life. Artificial lighting transformed the night. Instead of complete darkness, people could illuminate their homes with the flip of a switch. Eventually, security systems, street lighting, police, and modern infrastructure replaced many of the protective benefits that groups once provided naturally. For the first time in human history, a person could sleep completely alone while still remaining relatively safe. What was once an extraordinary luxury slowly became the cultural norm. Today, many children even sleep in separate bedrooms from a very young age. In many societies, privacy has become one of the highest priorities inside the home. But here's where things become especially interesting. Some researchers have asked a fascinating question. Could at least a small part of modern sleep problems be connected to this dramatic change? After all, our brains evolved over hundreds of thousands of years inside shared sleeping environments. Yet, in only a tiny fraction of our history, we suddenly shifted towards sleeping alone. This idea remains a hypothesis, not a scientific conclusion. Modern insomnia has many causes: artificial light, stress, irregular work schedules, caffeine, screen exposure before bed, mental health. All of these play important roles. No serious scientist believes sleeping alone explains every sleep problem. But it raises an intriguing possibility. Perhaps the modern sleeping environment is historically unusual, even if it now feels completely normal. Our bedrooms are quieter, safer, and more private than ever before, but they are also very different from the environments our ancestors experienced for thousands of generations. Sometimes, understanding the past helps explain why certain parts of modern life still feel surprisingly difficult. There's one final piece of this puzzle that makes ancient communal sleeping even more understandable. It happens every single night, inside your own body. While you sleep, your brain cycles through several different stages. One of those stages is called REM sleep. This is the period when most vivid dreams occur. But REM sleep has another remarkable feature. Your body temporarily shuts down almost all voluntary muscle movement. Scientists call this REM atonia. It's an automatic safety mechanism. Without it, people would physically act out their dreams. So while your mind is busy creating vivid experiences, your body remains almost completely motionless. From an evolutionary perspective, this may be the most physically vulnerable moment of the entire night. Imagine facing a predator while completely unable to move. That possibility helps explain why having other people nearby could be so valuable. Even if one person entered REM sleep, someone else in the group was likely awake, or at least sleeping lightly enough to respond. There's another mysterious experience that may be connected to this stage: sleep paralysis. Many people have experienced it at least once. You suddenly become aware of your surroundings, but you can't move. You try to lift your arms. Nothing happens. You try to speak. Nothing comes out. For a few frightening moments, your brain is awake while the body is still under the effects of REM atonia. Across many cultures, people once explained sleep paralysis through supernatural stories, ghosts, spirits, invisible visitors. Today, science offers a different explanation. Although researchers continue studying why sleep paralysis feels so intense, the biological mechanism itself is well understood. For our ancient ancestors, those few minutes of complete physical helplessness may have been one of the strongest reasons to avoid sleeping completely alone. But something else about human sleep is equally fascinating. Our ears never completely switch off. Even during deep sleep, the brain continues monitoring sounds from the environment. Not every sound receives equal attention. Research shows that meaningful sounds are processed differently from ordinary background noise. A parent, for example, is much more likely to wake up when hearing their own baby cry than when hearing many other sounds at the same volume. The sleeping brain is still listening, it's simply filtering information. Inside a communal sleeping group, that selective awareness may have helped people distinguish ordinary nighttime sounds from genuine signs of danger. A familiar cough, the crackling fire, someone turning over in their sleep. These sounds quickly became normal, but an unexpected rustle, unfamiliar footsteps, or the warning call of an animal could trigger an immediate response. Sleeping wasn't a complete shutdown. It was a carefully balanced state, allowing the brain to recover while still keeping one ear on the outside world. There's one final piece of evidence that's easy to overlook. It doesn't come from sleep laboratories or from modern psychology. It comes from archaeology. Across many ancient cultures, archaeologists have discovered burial sites where multiple individuals were laid to rest together. Often, their bodies were positioned remarkably close to one another. In some cases, their arrangements closely resemble the way people naturally sleep. Of course, burial rituals had their own cultural and spiritual meanings. We should be careful not to assume every burial directly reflects everyday sleeping habits. But when we combine archaeological evidence with anthropology, evolutionary biology, and sleep research, a consistent pattern begins to emerge. Physical closeness mattered, not only in life, but even in death. That tells us something important about how ancient humans understood safety, belonging, and community. And perhaps the most surprising confirmation comes from somewhere completely unexpected: modern survival training. Imagine a group of people stranded in a dangerous wilderness tonight. No electricity, no secure buildings, no emergency services. What would survival experts recommend? Almost certainly, they would not tell everyone to sleep separately. Instead, they would recommend staying together, keeping a fire burning, rotating watch responsibilities, and making sure someone remains alert while others sleep. In other words, modern survival experts often arrive at almost exactly the same solution our ancestors discovered thousands of years ago. Not because they inherited ancient traditions, but because the problem and the logic remain exactly the same. When danger increases, humans naturally cooperate. Different centuries, different technologies, the same survival strategy. So, why didn't ancient humans sleep alone? Because sleeping was never simply about resting. It was about surviving the most vulnerable hours of every single day. Sleeping together provided overlapping awareness, shared warmth, collective protection, psychological reassurance, safer care for children, stronger social bonds, and a practical system that required no complex planning at all. Nature quietly handled much of the work. Today, we live in a completely different world. Locked doors, climate-controlled homes, electric lights, security systems, police, hospitals, emergency services. Modern society has replaced many of the dangers our ancestors faced every night. That is why sleeping alone now feels perfectly ordinary. But from the perspective of human evolution, it's actually something remarkably new. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans survived because they faced the night together. Only recently have we become comfortable facing it alone. The next time you close your bedroom door, turn off the lights, and lie down in complete silence, remember this. Your ancestors almost never experienced a night like that. For them, sleep wasn't a private activity. It was a shared responsibility, one protected by family, friends, fire, and trust. Perhaps that's the biggest lesson hidden inside human history. Sometimes the things we call normal are actually the newest parts of our story, and the habits that seem ancient may still explain far more about ourselves than we realize. If you enjoyed this journey into human history, you'll probably be surprised by how many other everyday behaviors have ancient origins we rarely think about. Subscribe to MoneyQuill and join us as we uncover the hidden science, forgotten history, and fascinating logic behind the ordinary things we do every single day. Because the most interesting mysteries are often hiding in plain sight. Thanks for watching.